She was never supposed to be there. The Festival of Veils was for nobles, for wolves of standing, for those who belonged. Lysara was none of those things. She was a fugitive, a girl with silver in her blood and a death mark on her head. But the masks made everyone equal. And for one night, she let herself forget. She didn't know he was the Alpha King. Not when he pulled her onto the dance floor, his touch igniting something primal in her veins. Not when he whispered against her throat that he'd never wanted anything the way he wanted her. Not even when he carried her to his chambers and made her feel, for the first time in her miserable life, like she was worth something. She only discovered the truth at dawn, when the mask fell from his sleeping face and she saw the royal crest tattooed beneath his collarbone. Dristan Vailarine, the Wolf King of Valdoria, the man whose laws demanded her execution. She ran. She thought she'd disappear into the wilderness, become another nameless refugee lost among thousands. She thought he'd forget a single masked woman from a single reckless night. She was wrong, because Dristan didn't just remember her. He became obsessed. He tore his kingdom apart, searching for the woman who'd vanished from his bed like smoke through fingers. And what Lysara didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have known, was that something had happened between them that night. Something ancient. Something that bound his fate to hers. He wasn't just hunting her because he wanted her. He was hunting her because without her, he would die. The rain had been falling for 3 days straight when Lysara finally reached the capital. She stood at the edge of the forest, hood pulled low, watching the glittering lights of Valdoria's heart spread before her like scattered jewels. Torches lined every street. Colored lanterns swung from balconies and rooftops. Music drifted on the wind, wild and inviting, the Festival of Veils. Once a year, the kingdom celebrated the night when wolves shed their names and ranks. Everyone wore masks. Everyone was equal. For 12 hours, a servant could dance with a lord, a criminal could walk freely among guards, and no one asked questions. It was the only reason Lysara had risked coming here. She needed to cross through the capital to reach the northern border. The mountain passes beyond would take her out of Valdoria entirely, into the unclaimed territories where the king's laws meant nothing, where her silver blood wouldn't be a death sentence. Lysara pulled her worn cloak tighter and descended toward the city gates. Her stomach ached with hunger. She couldn't remember her last real meal. 2 days ago? 3? The guards at the gate barely glanced at her. They were laughing, passing a flask between them, already half drunk on festival spirits. One of them tossed her a mask from a basket beside the entrance. "Can't enter without a veil tonight, girl. King's orders." Lysara caught the mask reflexively. It was simple, black fabric with silver threading around the eyes. Her fingers trembled as she tied it in place. The king's orders. Even here, even during a festival of freedom, his shadow loomed. Inside the walls, the atmosphere shifted. The streets pulsed with energy. Wolves danced in the squares, their bodies moving to drums and pipes. Vendors sold spiced wine and roasted meats. Children chased each other through the crowds, their laughter bright against the night. For a moment, Lysara simply stood there, overwhelmed. She'd forgotten what joy looked like. "You seem lost?" The voice came from behind her, deep and smooth as aged whiskey. Lysara spun, her heart leaping into her throat. He was tall. That was her first thought. Tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a mask of midnight blue that covered everything above his jaw. What she could see of his face was sharp angles and bronzed skin, lips curved in the faintest hint of amusement. But it was his presence that stole her breath. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge. Her wolf, dormant for so long, suddenly stirred in her chest. "Alpha," her instincts screamed. "Danger." "I'm not lost," she managed. "Just passing through." "On festival night?" He tilted his head, studying her with unsettling intensity. "No one passes through on festival night. It's the one evening we're all allowed to be someone else." Lysara took a step back. "I should go." "Wait." He caught her wrist, and the contact sent lightning racing up her arm. They both froze. Something flickered behind his mask. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition of something neither of them understood. "Dance with me," he said. It wasn't quite a command. Not quite a request either. Something in between, rough with an urgency that matched the sudden pounding of her heart. "I don't know you." "That's the point." His thumb traced a circle against her pulse. "Tonight, we don't have to be anyone. No names, no histories, no consequences." She should have pulled away. Should have disappeared into the crowd, found passage through the city, continued running like she'd been running for 3 long years. But his hand was warm against her skin, and his scent, cedar and winter frost, wrapped around her like a promise. When was the last time someone had touched her with anything other than violence? "One dance," she whispered. His smile could have burned down kingdoms. One dance became 2. 2 became 10. Lysara lost track of time, lost track of caution, lost track of everything except the stranger's hands on her waist, his breath against her temple, the intoxicating way he looked at her like she was the only person in the world. They moved through the festival like they were caught in a fever dream. He bought her spiced wine that tasted like cinnamon and fire. He pulled her into a corner and fed her honeyed figs with his fingers, watching her mouth with darkening eyes. He spun her through dances she didn't know, laughing low when she stumbled, catching her before she could fall. And always, always, that electric tension building between them, growing tighter with every accidental brush of skin, every loaded glance. "Come with me," he murmured against her ear as the midnight bells began to toll. Lysara knew she should refuse. She didn't know this man, didn't know his name, his rank, his intentions. But her wolf was howling beneath her skin. Her blood was singing with a frequency she'd never felt before, like her entire body recognized him on some primal level her mind couldn't comprehend. "Yes," she breathed. He took her hand and led her through winding streets, up stone stairs into a building she was too dizzy to properly see. A door opened, closed. And then his mask was gone, tossed aside, and his mouth was on hers. The kiss obliterated thought. He tasted like the wine they'd shared, sweet and burning. His hands cradled her face like she was something precious, then slid down her body like she was something to be devoured. The contradiction made her whimper. "I don't do this," she gasped between kisses. "I never—" "Neither do I." His voice was wrecked, ragged at the edges. "But I can't. I need—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Neither could she. They fell into the bed together, a tangle of desperate hands and shed clothing. She'd never been touched like this. Like every inch of her skin was a revelation. Like her pleasure mattered more than his own. He mapped her body with his mouth, learned what made her cry out, what made her arch against him. And when they finally came together, Lysara felt something crack open inside her chest. A bond. Ancient and overwhelming and absolutely terrifying. She shoved the sensation down, told herself it was just the intensity of the moment. Just physical chemistry. Just a stranger's skilled hands making her feel things she'd never felt. But afterward, lying tangled in sheets that smelled like him, watching dawn creep through the window, she couldn't silence the truth whispering in her blood. Mate. He's your mate. Impossible. She couldn't have a mate. Wouldn't survive having one. Not with what she was. Lysara turned her head to look at him. He'd fallen asleep with his arm draped across her stomach, his face peaceful in a way that seemed foreign to his sharp features. The mask was gone. She could see him clearly now. High cheekbones, strong jaw, dark hair falling across his forehead. And there, just below his collarbone, a tattoo she hadn't noticed in the darkness, a wolf's head crowned with thorns, the royal crest of Aldoria. Lysara's blood turned to ice. She knew that symbol. Every wolf in the kingdom knew it. Every fugitive. Every silver-blooded criminal marked for death under the king's decree. The man lying beside her. the man she'd just given herself to completely, was Dristan Valerin, the Alpha King himself. The man who'd signed the execution orders for her entire bloodline. Lysara couldn't breathe. She lay perfectly still, her heart slamming against her ribs so violently she was certain it would wake him. The king's arm was heavy across her stomach. His breath was warm against her shoulder. His scent surrounded her. That cedar and frost that had seemed so intoxicating hours ago, now it smelled like a trap. Move slowly, don't panic, don't wake him. Inch by inch, she slid out from beneath his arm. He stirred, mumbled something incoherent, and she froze with her feet halfway to the floor. But his breathing evened again, and his hand simply curled around the pillow where she'd been lying. Lysara found her clothes scattered across the floor. She dressed with shaking fingers, biting her lip to keep any sound from escaping. Her eyes kept darting to the bed, to the sleeping king, to the tattoo that marked him as everything she should fear. He doesn't know what you are. He didn't see your eyes change. He didn't taste the silver in your blood. But he would. If she stayed, if the bond strengthened, if he looked closely enough, he would see the truth written in her very cells. And then, he would kill her. She was almost to the door when she paused, some foolish impulse making her turn back for one last look. He looked younger in sleep. The hard lines of command softened, the weight of a kingdom temporarily lifted from his shoulders. She could still feel the ghost of his hands on her skin, could still hear his voice, rough with wonder, murmuring words she'd never expected to hear. Beautiful. Perfect. Mine. Her throat tightened. In another life, maybe. If she'd been someone else. Something else. If her blood didn't mark her as an abomination. If his laws didn't demand her head. But this was the only life she had. And in it, staying meant death. Lysara slipped through the door and disappeared into the dawn. Dristan woke to cold sheets and silence. He reached for her automatically, still half caught in dreams of silver eyes and gasping breaths, and a connection so profound it had shattered something inside him. His hand found only empty space. He sat up. The chambers were flooded with pale morning light, revealing what darkness had hidden. Rich tapestries on the walls, a table still holding half-eaten festival treats. His discarded mask crumpled in the corner. No trace of her. Dristan threw back the covers and searched the room, then the adjacent bathing chamber, then the receiving room beyond. Nothing. No note, no personal item left behind, no indication that she'd ever existed beyond the rumpled sheets and the lingering traces of her scent. Wildflowers and rain. Something sweet beneath, like honeycomb. His wolf surged against his control, howling with a fury that matched his own. Mate. She was our mate. Where is she? Find her. Find her. He'd felt it the moment their hands touched, the bond snapping into place, a chain of fire and light linking her soul to his. He'd assumed she felt it too. Assumed she understood what was happening between them. Instead, she'd fled. The door burst open, and his second, Brenius, stumbled in with wide eyes. "My king, I heard," the guard said. He stopped short, taking in Dristan's bare chest, the wrecked bed, the feral expression on his alpha's face. "She's gone," Dristan growled. "Who's gone? What happened?" "The woman from last night. Masked. Silver threading on black fabric. She was here, in my chambers, in my bed." His voice cracked on the last word. "She left." Brenius paled. "My king, you didn't... Tell me you didn't bond with a stranger during the festival. I didn't choose it." Dristan's hands were shaking. He stared at them, unable to remember the last time his body had betrayed him so completely. "It just happened. The moment I touched her. Like lightning. Like everything the old stories described. The once-in-a-lifetime recognition of a true mate, and she'd run from him. Find her." The command came out rough, barely human. His wolf was pressing at the edges of his control, demanding he shift, demanding he hunt. "Every guard in the city, every tracker I have, Her scent is wildflowers and rain. She's small, dark hair. She moved like someone used to running. Find her. Brenius hesitated. My king, with respect, the festival was full of thousands of wolves. She could be anyone, from anywhere. She might not even be from Valdoria. Then search beyond Valdoria. The council won't approve resources for... Dryston grabbed him by the throat. The movement was too fast, too savage, driven by an instinct older than civilization. Brenius dangled in his grip, feet kicking uselessly, eyes bulging with shock rather than fear. I don't care what the council approves. Drystan's voice had dropped to something inhuman, his wolf bleeding through. I don't care if I have to tear this kingdom apart stone by stone. She is my mate. She is the only thing that can stop what's happening to me, and I will find her. He released Brenius, who collapsed to his knees, gasping. The curse is accelerating, Dryston added quietly, all the rage draining into something worse. Despair. 2 months. Maybe less. If I don't complete the bond. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Brenius knew what happened to an alpha who found and lost their true mate. The madness that consumed them. The slow death that followed. Search every village, Drystan commanded. Every forest. Every shadow she might hide in. He turned to the window, staring out at the kingdom spread before him. Somewhere out there, she was running. Thinking she'd escaped. She hadn't. I will not rest until she stands before me again. 3 weeks. 3 weeks of running, hiding, barely sleeping. 3 weeks of looking over her shoulder at every sound, every shadow, every stranger who glanced her way too long. Lysara had fled north, just as she'd originally planned. But the mountain passes she'd hoped to cross were crawling with soldiers now. Royal soldiers wearing the wolf and thorn crest she'd seen tattooed on the king's chest. He was looking for her. The realization had hit her like a physical blow when she'd first seen the wanted notices nailed to trees along the northern road. No name, of course. He didn't know her name. But the description was painfully accurate. Small frame, dark hair, silver-threaded black mask last seen at the Festival of Veils. Substantial reward for information leading to her location. By order of the Alpha King. He'd mobilized half his army to find a woman he'd spent one night with. Lysara had torn down every notice she encountered, but it was pointless. They appeared faster than she could destroy them. Word spread through villages like wildfire. The king was searching for his mystery woman. Some said she'd stolen from him. Others whispered she'd bewitched him with dark magic. A few, the romantics, believed it was a love story. None of them knew the truth. She'd doubled back south, then west, zigzagging across the kingdom in patterns designed to confuse any tracker. She slept in barns, in hollowed trees, in abandoned shepherds' huts. She ate what she could forage and stole only when starvation left no choice. And through it all, the bond pulsed in her chest like a second heartbeat. She'd hoped distance would weaken it, that whatever had formed between them would fade without proximity to sustain it. Instead, it grew stronger. Some nights she woke gasping, certain she could feel his frustration, his desperation, his rage bleeding through the connection. He was getting closer. She could sense it. Tonight, she'd found shelter in a fishing village on Valdoria's western coast. The Salt Maiden was a tavern that asked no questions, populated by smugglers and refugees, and others who preferred anonymity. Lysara sat in the darkest corner, nursing a watered ale she couldn't really afford, her hood pulled low. You hear about the king's hunt? A man at the next table was saying. They say he's gone mad, obsessed with finding some festival woman. His companion snorted. Mad? The Vyloran kings are all cursed, everyone knows that. His father died raving, his grandfather before him. It's in the blood. Lysara's fingers tightened around her mug. They say he's offering 10,000 gold pieces now, the first man continued. 10,000. For one woman. She must have one hell of a... Careful. A new voice cut in, sharp with warning. Speaking ill of the king's business isn't wise, even here. Lysara glanced up and felt her blood freeze. A man had entered the tavern, tall, broad-shouldered, with close-cropped hair and the bearing of a soldier despite his common clothing. He moved through the crowd with predatory grace, scanning faces with methodical precision. She recognized him instantly. He'd been standing near the king during the festival, watching his lord dance with a masked stranger. She dismissed him as a bodyguard then, unimportant. Now he was here, in this forgotten village, hunting. Lysara lowered her head further, letting her hair curtain her face. Her pulse raced so hard the men at the next table must surely hear it. "Don't look this way. Don't look this way. Don't." His gaze swept past her corner, paused, returned. For one eternal moment their eyes met through the shadows. Lysara saw recognition flicker across his features, saw his hand move toward his belt where a blade undoubtedly waited. She threw her mug at his face and ran. The tavern exploded into chaos behind her. Shouts, crashing furniture, the soldier's voice roaring for people to move. Lysara burst through the back door into the salt-tinged night and sprinted toward the docks. A fishing boat was just casting off, its crew preparing for a night catch. Lysara leaped onto the deck without permission, startling the weathered captain. "I can pay," she gasped. "Please, just get me away from here." The captain's eyes flicked past her to the tavern, where the soldier was fighting through the crowd toward the door. "How much?" he asked. Lysara emptied her pockets. Everything she had. Enough for maybe 2 more weeks of survival. Gone in an instant. The captain pocketed the coins and jerked his head toward the cargo hold. "Hide below. Don't make a sound." She disappeared into the darkness just as the soldier reached the dock, his curses carrying across the water. The boat pulled away into the night. But Lysara knew it was only a temporary escape. The soldier had seen her face. He would report back to his king. Drystan would know she'd been heading west. The noose was tightening. The fishing boat took her to Mirenvale, a port town clinging to the cliffs where Valdoria's western coast met the Serpent Sea. Lysara spent 2 days there, working in a laundry house for food and a pallet in the corner, planning her next move. She needed to get off the mainland entirely. The Thornless Isles lay 3 days' sail to the southwest, outside Valdoria's jurisdiction. If she could reach them, she'd finally be free. But passage to the Isles cost more gold than she could earn in a year. And the bond in her chest was burning now, constant and insistent, telling her that he was close, too close. On the 3rd night, she made her decision. She would stow away on a merchant vessel, hide among the cargo, and pray the sailors didn't find her before they reached open water. It was a desperate plan, but desperation was all she had left. She waited until the moon was hidden behind clouds, then crept toward the harbor. The windsworn lady was scheduled to depart at dawn, her hold already loaded with spices and silk bound for the Isles. Lysara had watched the crew's patterns for 2 days. She knew exactly which cargo door was left unguarded during the night watch. She was halfway across the dock when a hand closed around her arm. Finally. The voice sent ice through her veins, deep, commanding, achingly familiar. Drystan spun her to face him, and Lysara's breath died in her throat. He looked terrible. Dark circles bruised the skin beneath his eyes. His cheekbones stood out sharper than she remembered, as if he'd forgotten to eat for weeks. His hair was wild, uncombed, nothing like the polished royal she'd danced with at the festival. But his grip was iron, and his eyes burned with a fever that went beyond exhaustion. 3 weeks, he growled. 3 weeks I've hunted you across my kingdom. Do you have any idea what you've done to me? Let me go. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. You have no right. No right? A laugh tore from him, raw and broken. You're my mate. Mine. I felt it the moment we touched. I know you felt it too. And you left. I had to. Why? She pressed her lips together, refusing to answer. Drystan's grip tightened. Not enough to hurt, but enough to remind her she wasn't going anywhere. You ran from me like I was a monster. You've been hiding in hovels and fishing boats, starving yourself, terrified. Of what? Of me? Yes, she whispered. Of you. Something cracked in his expression. Pain, genuine and profound, bleeding through the royal mask. I would never hurt you, he said, his voice dropping. You're my mate. Hurting you would be like cutting out my own heart. You don't understand. Then make me understand. Guards were approaching from both ends of the dock, cutting off any escape. Lysera counted 6, maybe 7. Far too many to fight. Far too many to evade. She was truly caught. I can't tell you, she said. If I tell you, you'll kill me. Drystan flinched as if she'd struck him. What could possibly make you believe? Your laws. The words were bitter on her tongue. Your decrees, the execution orders signed with your own hand. That's why I ran, Your Majesty. Because I know exactly what you do to people like me. Confusion clouded his features, then suspicion, then something sharper, more dangerous. People like you, he repeated slowly. What does that mean? Lysara stayed silent. Drystan leaned closer, his presence overwhelming, his scent wrapping around her despite her resistance. Cedar and frost, the smell of her dreams, the smell of her nightmares. You're coming back to the palace with me, he said. You can tell me your secrets there, or you can stay silent. But you will not run again. I won't survive it if you run again. The raw honesty in his voice almost broke her. Almost. I'll never stop trying to escape, she promised. His smile was sad, exhausted, and strangely tender. I know. But I have a castle full of guards and a wolf that will track you to the ends of the earth. Eventually you'll realize there's nowhere left to run. He signaled to his men, and they closed in around her. Lysara's last glimpse before they covered her head with a hood was Drystan's face, haunted by something she couldn't name. The palace was a cage of marble and gold. Lysara had been installed in chambers fit for a queen, which she supposed was intentional. The rooms were vast, decorated with tapestries depicting Valdoria's history, furnished with pieces that cost more than most villages earned in a decade. A balcony overlooked the royal gardens, and the bed was so soft she sank into it like falling into a cloud. She hated every inch of it. Guards stood outside her door at all hours. The windows were fitted with iron grating, beautiful but impenetrable. Servants brought her meals, drew her baths, offered her gowns from the royal collection. They treated her with deference, calling her "my lady," as if she belonged here, as if she weren't a prisoner. 3 days passed in suffocating luxury. Lysara refused to wear the gowns, refused to eat more than the minimum required to survive, refused to engage with the servants' gentle attempts at conversation. She also refused to see the king. He came to her door every evening. She heard his voice through the wood, sometimes commanding, sometimes pleading, sometimes simply sitting in silence as if proximity alone might convince her to open it. She never did. On the 4th night, he stopped asking permission. The door swung open without warning, and Drystan strode in, his expression a thundercloud of frustration and something deeper. Something that looked almost like desperation. You haven't eaten today, he said. The servants reported that you sent every meal back untouched. Lysara was curled in the window seat, staring at the moonlit gardens below. She didn't turn to look at him. I'm not hungry. You're punishing yourself. Or perhaps punishing me. Either way, it ends now. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and crouched before her, forcing himself into her line of sight. This close, she could see the deterioration more clearly. His skin had a grayish cast. Fine tremors ran through his hands. The fever in his eyes had intensified, glowing like embers in a fading hearth. He was sick, truly sick. The realization stirred something unwanted in her chest. What's wrong with you? She asked before she could stop herself. Drystan smiled bitterly. You mean besides my mate refusing to acknowledge my existence? Besides the bond slowly tearing my mind apart because it remains incomplete? The bond can't. Can't what? Kill me? He laughed, hollow and humorless. My bloodline carries a curse, little wolf, has for generations. When we find our true mate, we must complete the bond within 2 moon cycles. If we don't, he spread his hands. Madness first, then death. My father found his mate and lost her before they could complete the bond. She was murdered by what we were told were enemies of the crown. He lived 12 more years, but the curse hollowed him out slowly. By the end, he was more ghost than king, raving and broken. The madness consumed him completely. Lysara's throat tightened. That's not my problem. No? You felt the bond form. You feel it now, don't you? Pulling at you, whispering that you belong with me, that we're meant to be together. She said nothing, but her silence was answer enough. Drystan's expression softened into something almost vulnerable. I'm not asking you to love me. I'm not asking for forever. I'm asking you to tell me why you're so afraid. Because I cannot fight an enemy I don't understand. You are the enemy, she whispered. Why? The word hung between them, heavy with everything unspoken. Lysara turned away, pressing her forehead against the cold window glass. Her reflection stared back at her, pale and haunted. There are people in this kingdom, she said slowly, who are born with something different in their blood, something that marks them as dangerous, unnatural. Your grandfather called them abominations. Your father upheld the decree. And you, she swallowed hard. You signed the most recent execution orders, 2 years ago. 16 people put to death in a single day. Drystan went very still. You're talking about the silver-blooded, he said quietly. Yes. Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Lysara waited for the disgust, the horror, the cold command for guards to drag her to the dungeons. Instead, Drystan exhaled slowly. Look at me. She didn't move. Lysara, look at me. The sound of her name on his lips the first time he'd used it shocked her into turning. His face held no hatred, no revulsion, only a terrible, dawning understanding. Show me, he said softly. Show me your eyes. Her heart stopped. You already know. Why do you need? Because I need to see. I need to be certain before I tell you something that will change everything you think you know about me and my family. His gaze held hers, steady and certain. Whatever she saw there, it wasn't the reaction she'd expected. It wasn't the reaction she'd spent 3 years dreading. Slowly, terrified, Lysara let the mask she'd worn her entire life slip away. Her eyes shifted, the dark brown bleeding into molten silver, luminous and inhuman in the candlelight. The mark of her bloodline, the death sentence she'd been born carrying. Drystan looked at her transformed eyes for a long, long moment. And then he said the last thing she ever expected to hear. My mother was silver-blooded, so am I. Lysara stared at him, certain she'd misheard. That's impossible, she breathed. You're the king. You signed the execution orders. I signed papers placed before me by my council. Drystan's voice was heavy with something that sounded like shame. Documents I was told were necessary for the kingdom's protection. I never witnessed the executions, never questioned the necessity. He paused, his jaw tightening. I was 18 when I took the throne. My father had just died screaming, consumed by the mating curse. My mother had been dead for 12 years. I was alone, surrounded by advisors who'd served my family for generations, and I trusted them. Your mother. Lysara's mind was spinning. How can the queen have been silver-blooded? The entire kingdom would have known. She hid it, just as you've hidden it. Drystan moved to the fireplace, staring into the flames. The orange light carved shadows across his face, making him look older, wearier. She was common-born. Did you know that? My father found her in a village near the eastern border. The bond struck them both like lightning, just as it struck us. He brought her to the palace, married her against the council's wishes, and she concealed her nature for 15 years. What happened to her? The question hung in the air. Drystan's hands gripped the mantelpiece so hard his knuckles went white. She was murdered, he said quietly. When I was 6 years old. They told me it was an assassination by enemy wolves, that foreign agents had infiltrated the palace and poisoned her. His voice cracked. I believed that story for 20 years. And now? Now I've spent 3 weeks tearing my kingdom apart looking for you, and in doing so, I've uncovered things I was never meant to find. He turned to face her, and his eyes were blazing with barely contained fury. My mother wasn't killed by foreign agents. She was executed. In secret, in the palace dungeons, on the orders of my father's most trusted advisor. Why? Because she was pregnant with her second child, another silver-blooded heir, and Lord Malachar Kavrin decided that one abomination in the royal bloodline was quite enough. The name struck Lysara like a blade between her ribs. Lord Malachar Kavrin. Every silver-blooded wolf who'd ever fled for their life knew that name. He's the one who gives the execution orders, she whispered. Not you. He controls the tribunals. He decides who lives and who dies. Yes. Drystan's expression was murderous. He's been controlling this kingdom's policy towards silver-blooded wolves for 30 years. 3 generations of kings, all dancing to his tune. My grandfather was the one who first decreed the purges, but it was Kavrin who whispered the fear into his ear. Kavrin who suggested that silver blood was dangerous, corrupting, a plague that needed to be eliminated. But you have silver blood yourself. Why would he let you live? Drystan laughed bitterly. Because I'm useful. A king he can manipulate is far more valuable than a dead one. And because I didn't know, I thought I was fully my father's son, untainted by my mother's supposed weakness. He met her eyes. I didn't learn the truth about my own blood until a week ago, when I had the palace physicians examine me. I was trying to understand why the mating bond affected me so intensely, why my wolf seemed to recognize you on a level that went beyond normal attraction. And they found silver in your blood. Enough to mark me for execution under my own laws. The irony was so bitter Lysara could taste it. This is why you need me, she said slowly, pieces clicking together. Not just for the mating bond. You need me because I understand what it means to carry this curse, because I've survived it. I need you because you're my mate. Drystan crossed the distance between them, stopping just inches away. Everything else, the blood, the politics, the secrets, none of it matters compared to that single fact. You are mine and I am yours. We were made for each other, Lysara. Literally, cosmically, irrevocably. His hand rose to cup her face and she let him. His palm was warm against her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. I know you're afraid, he murmured. I know you have every reason to hate me, but I'm asking you to give me a chance. Help me understand what Kavrin has been doing. Help me stop him. And maybe, in time, you might stop seeing me as the enemy. Lysara's heart was at war with itself. 3 years of running, of fear, of absolute certainty that the crown meant death. And now, here was the king himself, silver-blooded like her, asking for her trust. There's something else you should know, she said quietly, about why I was running, about what happened to my family. Drystan waited, his thumb still stroking her skin. My mother was a healer in the village of Thornhaven. My father was a blacksmith. We weren't anyone important. But my mother's grandmother had passed down the silver blood, and it manifested in me when I turned 16. She swallowed hard. Someone reported us. Soldiers came in the night. My parents were killed trying to protect me. I only survived because our neighbor, a woman who'd known me since birth, hid me in her root cellar while they burned our house. Lysara. The man who led those soldiers, she continued, her voice hardening. The man who gave the order to burn my home with my parents' bodies still inside. I saw his face through the cellar grating. I've never forgotten it. Who? She met his eyes, her silver gaze blazing. Lord Malachar Kavrin. The name hung between them like a blade. Drystan went absolutely still. His hand fell from her face. For a long moment he simply stared at her. processing the implications of what she'd just revealed. He was there personally, he said finally. At a routine village purge. That doesn't make sense. Kivrin commands from the palace. It wasn't routine. Lysara's hands were shaking. She'd never told anyone this, never spoken the words aloud. My mother wasn't just a village healer, Drystan. She was the healer. The one silver-blooded wolves traveled hundreds of miles to see. She could cure things that regular medicine couldn't touch, illnesses that should have been fatal, wounds that should have killed. Understanding dawned in his eyes. She was powerful. Too powerful to be allowed to live. Kivrin must have heard rumors, must have realized that a silver blood with her abilities could become a rallying point for others like us. She wrapped her arms around herself, fighting the memories. So he came himself. Made sure the job was done properly. Made sure no one survived who might carry her knowledge forward. But you survived. Because he didn't know about me. My mother was careful. She'd bound my abilities before they could fully manifest. Hidden the silver in my eyes with herbal compounds. Kept me secret even from our neighbors. The woman who hid me, Brekka, she knew the truth, but she was loyal. She never told a soul. Drystan was pacing now, his wolf bleeding through in the restless movement. If Kivrin knew you existed, if he knew you were your mother's daughter, he'd kill me. Yes. Which is why I've been running for 3 years. Why I never stay anywhere long enough to be recognized. Why I nearly died of terror when I realized I'd spent the night with the king himself. She laughed, the sound cracked and hollow. I thought you would execute me the moment you discovered what I was. I never imagined. She gestured between them. Any of this. Drystan stopped pacing. He stood in the center of the room, shoulders rigid, jaw set with determination. We have to expose him, he said. Everything he's done. The purges, my mother's murder, your family. All of it. He's been controlling this kingdom through fear and lies for decades. How? He's the most powerful lord in Valdoria. The council answers to him. Half the military commanders owe him their positions. But I'm still the king. Drystan's eyes flashed gold, his wolf rising to the surface. And I have something Kivrin never anticipated. A mate with silver blood and every reason to want him destroyed. The bond between them pulsed, warm and insistent. Lysara felt it calling to her, urging her to trust, to believe, to finally stop running. There's a ceremony, she said slowly. Something my mother told me about before she died. An old ritual for true mates with silver blood. If both carry the gift, the bond doesn't just connect them, it amplifies their power. Makes them stronger than either would be alone. Strong enough to challenge Kivrin? Strong enough to break any curse he might have placed on your bloodline. Drystan froze. What do you mean, curse he might have placed? Lysara frowned. The mating curse. The one that kills your line if the bond isn't completed. You said it's been in your family for generations. I assumed it was natural. A consequence of our bloodline's power. My mother studied these things. She said true mate bonds were never meant to be deadly. They were meant to strengthen wolves, not destroy them. She stepped closer, certainty building in her chest. What if the curse isn't natural at all? What if someone placed it deliberately? Someone like Kivrin. Someone who wanted to ensure that the kings of Valdoria could be controlled through their greatest vulnerability, their mates. The color drained from Drystan's face as he processed the implications. My father, he found his mate and she was killed within hours. The curse took him slowly after that, before he could recover, before he could investigate, before he could question anything. And your grandfather? His mate died in childbirth. At least, that's what I was told. Drystan's voice was hollow. Kivrin was the attending physician. He'd trained in medicine before turning to politics. The truth settled over them like a shroud. 3 generations of queens, dead by Kivrin's hand. 3 generations of kings, weakened by grief and the mating curse, malleable and desperate. And at the center of it all, One man pulling strings, shaping policy, orchestrating the genocide of silver-blooded wolves. "We have to move tonight," Lysara said urgently. "If he suspects what we've discovered." The door burst open. Soldiers poured into the room, a dozen of them, wearing not the royal crest but Kavrin's personal sigil, a silver serpent consuming its own tail. And behind them, stepping through the doorway with a smile of pure malevolence, was Lord Malachar Kavrin himself. "Ah," he said pleasantly, "I was rather hoping you'd figure it out eventually. It makes this so much more satisfying." Lord Kavrin was older than Lysara remembered. His hair had gone fully silver in the 3 years since she'd seen him through the root cellar grating, and new lines carved his narrow face. But his eyes were the same, pale and cold as a winter grave. "The king and his silver-blooded whore," Kavrin mused, strolling into the room as if he owned it. "I must admit, when my scouts reported you'd found a mystery woman at the festival, I never imagined she'd be the daughter of Sarah Veldris." His gaze fixed on Lysara with predatory interest. "You have your mother's eyes. I should have burned that cellar more thoroughly." Drystan moved in front of Lysara, his body a shield between her and the soldiers. "You're committing treason. Kavrin! These men answer to me. These men answer to whoever pays them. And I've been paying them considerably longer than you've been wearing that crown." Kavrin's smile widened. "Did you enjoy my little revelation? Discovering your mongrel blood? I've been waiting years for the right moment to let that truth slip. A king questioning his own legitimacy is a king easily controlled. You killed my mother. I removed a threat to the kingdom's stability. Your father was already showing signs of silverblood sympathy. Defending wolves who should have been put down. Questioning policies that had kept Valdoria pure for generations. Your mother's influence was corrupting him." Kavrin shrugged elegantly. "I simply corrected the problem." "And the mating curse?" Lysara demanded. "Did you create that too?" Something shifted in Kavrin's expression. Surprise, perhaps, that she'd figured it out. "Clever girl, your mother's intelligence, clearly." He clasped his hands behind his back, pacing like a lecturer before students. "The Valoran bloodline has always been dangerously powerful. True mate bonds only amplified that power. I needed a way to ensure that even if a king found his mate, he could be controlled through her. The curse was elegant, really. Find your mate and complete the bond within 2 moons or die screaming. It made the kings desperate, vulnerable, grateful for any guidance I offered." "You murdered 3 queens!" Drystan snarled. "I removed obstacles. Your grandmother was beginning to suspect me. Your mother was actively investigating the purges. And your father's mate." Kavrin laughed. "Well, she simply had the misfortune of being bonded to a king who was already asking too many questions. Her death broke him completely, made him pliable for the remaining years of his reign." "Why?" Lysara's voice trembled with rage. "Why do you hate us so much? What did silver-blooded wolves ever do to you?" Kavrin's expression shifted, something ancient and bitter surfacing beneath the polished cruelty. "My sister was silver-blooded," he said quietly, "the only person I ever loved. When I was 15, she was discovered and executed by order of the old king, Drystan's great-grandfather. I watched them burn her alive in the town square." Lysara felt the words like a blow. "So you became the very monster who destroyed her?" "I became the monster who controls the monsters." Kavrin's voice hardened. "If I couldn't save my sister, I would ensure that I was never powerless again. I would make myself indispensable to the crown, embed myself so deeply that no king could rule without me. And I would decide who lived and who died among our kind." "You're silver-blooded yourself," Drystan realized. "That's how you place the curse. That's how you've lived so long without aging normally." "My sister's death awakened abilities I'd kept dormant for years. Ironic, isn't it? The very power I've been exterminating has kept me alive to continue the extermination." He gestured to his soldiers. "But this conversation has become tiresome. Kill the woman. We'll tell the court she was an assassin who bewitched the king." "No." The word erupted from Drystan with such force that the soldiers hesitated. His eyes blazed full gold now, his wolf fully present, and the air in the room seemed to thicken with his power. You forget something, Kavrin. I've felt the curse weakening these past weeks. Every moment I spend with my mate, every time the bond strengthens between us, your hold on me lessens. He reached back and took Lysara's hand. You built your power on controlling the mating bond. What happens when we complete it? Fear flickered across Kavrin's face, the first genuine emotion Lysara had seen from him. Kill them both, he commanded. Now. The soldiers charged, and Lysara stopped thinking. The power she'd spent her whole life suppressing, the silver fire her mother had bound before it could fully form, erupted from her in a blinding wave. It wasn't flame exactly, but light, pure and devastating, carrying 3 years of grief and rage. 3 soldiers went down instantly. The others faltered, shielding their eyes. Drystan moved like lightning. His wolf didn't fully emerge, but claws extended from his fingers, and he tore through the remaining soldiers with brutal efficiency. They'd been trained to fight wolves, not an alpha king protecting his mate with 20 years of combat experience and nothing left to lose. In seconds, it was over. Only Kavrin remained, backing toward the door, his face pale with shock. Impossible, he whispered. Her powers were bound. I checked. I always check. My mother bound my abilities years ago, Lysara said, stalking toward him. But no binding holds forever. Not against this much fear, this much rage. She raised her hand, silver light crackling between her fingers. 3 years of pressure building behind a wall she built to protect me. Now there's nothing left to contain it. Wait. Drystan's voice stopped her mid-stride. He deserves to die, she snarled. He deserves justice. Public justice. Drystan stepped beside her, his hand closing over hers. Every crime exposed, every victim named, every lie dragged into the light. If we kill him here, in secret, his supporters will claim we murdered an innocent man. But if we put him on trial, the silver-blooded wolves he persecuted will know the truth, Lysara finished slowly. They'll know it was one of their own who orchestrated their deaths. Kavrin's face twisted with hatred. You think anyone will believe you? I've controlled this kingdom for 30 years. I have allies in every corner. You have mercenaries who can be outbid and cowards who'll abandon you the moment you're no longer useful. Drystan's voice was ice. Guards! The real guards! Those loyal to the crown! The door burst open again, but this time it was palace soldiers who flooded in, led by the broad-shouldered man Lysara recognized from the docks in Mirenval. Brennius, Drystan said. Arrest Lord Kavrin. The charges are treason, regicide, and conspiracy to commit genocide. Kavrin struggled as they seized him, screaming threats and promises of vengeance. But his power was broken. Everyone in that room could see it. As they dragged him away, he locked eyes with Lysara one final time. This changes nothing, he spat. The curse is still in place. You have 3 weeks at most before it kills him, and breaking it requires power even your mother didn't possess. The door slammed shut behind him. Lysara turned to Drystan, fear clenching her heart. Is that true? 3 weeks? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The gray pallor of his skin, the tremors in his hands, told her everything. They defeated Kavrin. But the curse remained. The palace descended into chaos over the following days. News of Kavrin's arrest spread like wildfire. Nobles who'd supported him scrambled to distance themselves. Those he'd oppressed emerged from hiding, demanding justice, demanding acknowledgement, demanding that the purges end forever. Drystan addressed the kingdom from the palace steps, Lysara standing beside him. He revealed everything, his mother's true nature, his own silver blood, the conspiracy that had shaped Valdoria for 3 generations. He abolished the execution orders with a single proclamation and invited silver-blooded wolves to return home without fear. The reactions were mixed. Some cheered, others wept. A few nobles stormed away in fury, their prejudices too deep to surrender. But for Lysara, none of it mattered. Because Drystan was dying. The curse had accelerated since Cavern's arrest, as if his magic was making one final attempt to claim its victim. Drystan collapsed twice during the public address. By the third day, he couldn't leave his bed. Lysara sat beside him, holding his hand, watching the life drain from his face. "There has to be a way," she whispered. "My mother knew so much. There has to be something. You're doing everything you can." His voice was barely audible. "You've already given me more than I deserved. Peace with my mother's memory. Justice for her death. A chance to undo the evil my family perpetuated. That's not enough. It's more than any of my ancestors achieved." She wanted to scream at him for giving up, for accepting this fate so calmly when they'd only just found each other, only just begun to understand what they could be together. Then she remembered. "The ceremony," she said suddenly. "The one I mentioned before. For true mates with silver blood." Drystan's eyes flickered. "You said it would amplify our power." "I said it would make us stronger than either would be alone. Strong enough to break any curse." She gripped his hand tighter. "I don't know the exact ritual. My mother died before she could teach me fully, but I remember fragments. And your palace has a library full of texts on silverblood magic that Cavern collected to better destroy us. Using his own weapons against him." A ghost of a smile crossed Drystan's lips. "I like the poetry of that." They worked through the night. Lysara commandeered every text on mate bonds, silver blood, and ancient rituals. Brenius helped coordinate the search, bringing her crumbling manuscripts and forgotten journals that hadn't been opened in decades. By dawn, she had it. "The ritual of shared flame," she read aloud, her voice trembling with hope and exhaustion. "When two wolves of silver blood find their fated bond, they may forge it complete through the sharing of their inner fire. Each must open fully to the other, holding nothing back, and in the joining of their flames, all external bonds will shatter." "All external bonds," Drystan repeated, "including the curse." "It's dangerous. The text says incomplete trust will cause the ritual to fail, if either party holds back, if either conceals any part of themselves. Then we don't hold back." Drystan struggled upright, his determination overriding his weakness. "I've already told you everything. My mother, my blood, my failures, my fears. There's nothing left I'm hiding." Lysara hesitated. "There's something I haven't told you," she admitted. "About that night. The festival." He waited, patient despite the curse consuming him. "I felt the bond form, the moment we touched. I knew what you were to me, what we could be together." She met his eyes, silver to gold. "I told myself I ran because I was afraid of being executed, and that was true, but it wasn't the whole truth." "Then what was?" "I ran because I'd never been loved before, not truly. My parents loved me, but they were terrified of what I was. They hid me, bound me, treated me like a danger to be contained. And everyone I've met since their death has wanted to use me or destroy me." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "When I felt that bond, when I realized what it meant, I was more terrified than I'd ever been in my life, because loving someone means losing them, and I couldn't bear to lose anyone else." Drystan reached up, brushing her tears away with trembling fingers. "You won't lose me," he said softly. "Not if we do this together. You don't know that. I know that I would rather die trying to complete our bond than die with it unfulfilled. I know that every moment I've spent with you has been the happiest of my miserable existence. And I know," his voice cracked, "I know that I love you, Lysara. I loved you before I knew your name, before I saw your silver eyes, before I understood anything about who you truly are. I loved the woman who danced with me like the world didn't exist. I loved the woman who ran because she'd been hurt too many times to trust. And I love the woman sitting beside me now, fighting for my life when anyone else would have let me die." Lysara leaned down and kissed him. It was gentle, desperate, tasting of tears and hope, and everything they'd been afraid to feel. "I love you too," she whispered against his lips. "I think I have since that first night. I was just too afraid to admit it." They performed the ritual as dawn broke over Valdoria. Lysara placed her hands over Drystan's heart, feeling the sluggish beat beneath her palms. He placed his hands over hers, his touch weakened but determined. They closed their eyes, and they opened themselves completely. The silver fire rose between them, hers burning bright, his flickering weakly. She felt his fear, his exhaustion, his desperate hope. She felt the curse wrapped around his heart like chains of ice, and she burned it away. The fire flowed through him, warming what the curse had frozen, healing what it had damaged. She felt him gasp beneath her hands, felt his heart surge into a stronger rhythm, felt the gray pallor of his skin flush with returning life. But the ritual demanded more than healing. It demanded joining. She opened herself fully, letting him see everything. Her childhood hiding in shadows, her parents' deaths, her years of running, her terror and her loneliness, and her desperate, aching need to be loved without conditions. And he opened himself in return. The boy who'd lost his mother too young, the king who'd inherited a broken legacy, the man who'd signed execution orders without understanding what he was truly destroying. Their flames merged. The bond snapped into place with a force that shook the room. The windows rattled. The candles flared and went out. And then everything went still. Lysara opened her eyes. Drystan was staring at her with wonder, his gray skin now flushed with health, his eyes blazing gold and silver intertwined. "It worked," he breathed. She laughed, the sound catching in her throat. "It worked." He surged up and kissed her, strong arms wrapping around her, pulling her close. She could feel him through the bond now, not just his emotions, but his very essence, intertwined with hers forever. "I love you," he murmured against her mouth. "I know," she said. "I can feel it." 6 months later, the gardens were in full bloom when Lysara walked among them, her hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly. Much had changed since that night. Kavrin's trial had lasted 3 weeks. Every crime was exposed. Every victim was named. The silver-blooded wolves who'd survived his purges testified to the horrors they'd endured. In the end, he was executed by the very laws he'd created. His own poison turned against him. The academy Lysara's mother had dreamed of was now under construction. A place where silver-blooded wolves could train their abilities safely, learn to control them, perhaps even use them to help others. They'd named it after Sarah Veldris. And Valdoria itself was healing. Wolves who'd hidden their nature for generations were emerging into the light. Mixed families who'd lived in terror were finally safe. It would take years to undo the damage Kavrin had wrought, but for the first time in decades, there was hope. "There you are." Drystan's voice came from behind her, warm with affection. She turned to find him approaching, more handsome than ever in the afternoon light. The curse was fully broken now, not just for him, but for the entire Valorin bloodline. Their children would never suffer as he had. "The council meeting ended early?" she asked. "I may have suggested we adjourn." He pulled her close, one hand settling over her belly. "I missed you. You saw me 3 hours ago?" 3 hours too long." She laughed and leaned into his embrace. Through the bond, she felt his contentment, his joy, his profound gratitude for every moment they shared. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night?" she asked. "At the festival?" "I said many things that night, most of them embarrassingly romantic. You said tonight we didn't have to be anyone. No names, no histories, no consequences." Drystan smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I was wrong about the consequences. You were wrong about all of it." She turned in his arms, cupping his face in her hands. "Our names matter. Our histories matter. They made us who we are. And the consequences—" She took his hand and pressed it firmly against her belly, where their child was growing. "The consequences are everything." Drystan's eyes glistened. He knelt before her, pressing his forehead to her stomach, and she felt his love pouring through the bond like sunlight. They'd both spent so long running, from their pasts, from their natures, from the possibility of connection. But they'd found each other anyway, and in finding each other, they'd found home.